quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch.
Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
Good day and welcome to the Yahowah blog. We are here, obviously, in our ocean studios. We're going to resume with the prophet Micah, but I'd like to speak a little about what has transpired in these last couple of days. Prior to Israel and America deciding they would attack Iran again, I was a very strong opponent of this conflict. It's not because I have any affinity for Iran. I don't. Well, particularly the Iranian Islamic government. No one knows more about Islam or is more disgusted by Islam than I am, having written 5 books on the subject. Actually more all total, but my Goddamn Religion series is 4,200 pages. And it covers every verse in the Quran, providing my own translations and others, while setting the Quran in chronological order in the context of Muhammad's life using the earliest and most credible hadith sources. Islam has never been more exposed or condemned, eviscerated, than it is in those volumes, which explain exactly why Muslims are trying to destroy Israel. And so I understand this beast quite well. I also understood that there was an absolute certainty that Iran was enriching uranium for a bomb. This is obvious since there is no purpose of enriching uranium beyond 5% if you're going to use it for civilian purposes, particularly when you're dealing with quantities up above 400 kilograms. And doing so while estranging your nation from the world and forcing your people to endure all manner of hardships because of sanctions would never have been done if it weren't to stockpile uranium-235 at a fiscal purity to create nuclear warheads. So I knew that was the case as well. It was just my conclusion that Iran would use them to make themselves impenetrable from attacks like these, but never use them, which I actually thought was a good idea because I recognize Israel cannot win a war against Iran. And now Iran has proven that the same thing would be true with regard to the United States. It can't win a war against Iran. So making Iran no longer susceptible to American or Israeli attack by having a nuclear bomb wasn't troublesome to me because I didn't think there was any chance that Iran would use a nuclear bomb offensively in a first strike against Israel. I've always thought there was a greater likelihood of Israel being so panicked by the war that it has caused with Iran that it would strike with its nuclear weapons. With all that being said, the reason I was so opposed to Israel being involved in another war with Iran is that there is no way for Israel to prevail. And I knew that even with the United States, the situation would actually be worse, not better. And that is because Donald Trump is Rahab. The prophet spoke of him in 4 different places. He is the corporeal manifestation of Satan. He'll be the worst man who has ever lived by the time the next 7 years are over. And I knew that he would betray Israel. And what we're hearing now is the first hints of that betrayal. He is announcing that he is going to remove America from the war, which is the best of a series of bad decisions. This war cannot be won. If he pursues a land invasion, it will be catastrophic for America. It will cause America to be more entrenched in this conflict and have fewer options to get out of this conflict. And even though America could be successful in occupying islands within the Persian Gulf, occupying the islands won't accomplish anything beneficial. And should America try it, then the Gulf states are all destroyed. And I can tell you that I'd be leading the parade of cheers if Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia were decimated. I don't care that the people are harmed. I want the leaders gone, and the money that they extract from the black ooze to stop funding hatred towards Jews. So this would actually be a good thing. I didn't think that the donkey that would be kicking them in the arse would be Iran, of course, but that's the way that the prophets have spoken of it, and that's the way that it has turned out. And while that might be a good thing, it would be devastating for the world. It would set the world into economic collapse because of the price of oil, the lack of fertilizer. And Trump is literally talking about now ending America's battle in this war of choice that he began without liberating the Strait of Hormuz. And with the Strait of Hormuz controlled by Iran, Iran controls everyone in the region. The petrodollar system is over. And when the petrodollar system is over, the United States economy is over. By retreating under this mess, the U.S.'s potential to project power or credibility anywhere in the world is over. It's a devastating situation. And then the worst of it is it leaves Israel hanging, which is what I suspected. And they cannot fight a war against Iran alone. They couldn't succeed with the United States, most certainly can't succeed without them. And as a small country, they have no chance of holding off the barrage of missiles and drones. And even the missiles they bring down and the drones they bring down is a loss to Israel because the interceptors are so much more precious in terms of lead times to acquire more of and expensive. Plus, so many are now getting through. And now you have Lebanon and the Houthis engaged in the conflict. And there's really nothing Israel can do to stop it. And as a tiny country that is vulnerable, it was really foolish for Netanyahu to engage Israel in this war. And so now that we know Trump is contemplating pulling out, leaving Israel vulnerable with the Straits of Hormuz still under Iranian lockdown, this is devastating. Israel now has made complete enemies of Russia and of China, and is being abandoned by the United States and has no other friends in the world. It is interesting, too, that as you read through the prophets, this was especially true in the 13th chapter of Yahowah, Isaiah, that he describes the final siege army that attacks Israel. Now, know that Ezekiel is a false prophet, so there is no Magog or Gog. There is no Armageddon, no war of that kind. There is a final battle, and it is one nation, a mountainous nation, further away than one or two countries removed from Israel, that can amass millions of troops. And that foe, obviously, is Iran. And so ultimately, whether there be hiatuses that allow both sides to rearm, or this war just continues to simmer, eventually, Iran is going to send millions of ground troops into Israel. So this is the fate of the nation, and it's only Yahowah who in the end will stop it. But by that time, as the prophet Zacharyah has stated, 2 out of every 3 Jews worldwide will be dead. So I want you to know that this conflict and its aftermath is one that I have predicted, as I have predicted everything that you have done now for the past almost 20 years, and the consequence of each of your actions, while constantly giving you better options. The most interesting of those, should you doubt my credibility in this regard, go read the open letter that I wrote on 10/7/23, stating what you would do, why it would fail, and what you should have done, and why it would have succeeded. And now, while I lament you did not listen to me, and that you chose to engage Iran in yet another war, it's going to be devastating. And you might say, so why should we listen to you? You're a guy talking to us on an island far away. You have no credentials at all that we should care about. Au contraire. I'm mentioned more in the prophets than almost anyone. I'm the person that is referred to in the Towrah as the Nakri, the person that at the commencement of the first temple that Solomon spoke of as the Nakri, the observant foreigner, who you need to listen to at this time. I am the man that Isaiah in the 63rd chapter speaks of as the man from Edom. I am the person that Yeshayah, Isaiah, addressed in the 11th chapter as the Choder. You can choose to listen now, or you will listen later. But for those who listen now and respond, go to yahowah.com and begin reading. All the books are free. I want nothing from you other than your attention. I want you to walk away from your rabbis who are misleading you and abusing you, and your politicians who are equally bad towards you. Stop relying on your IDF and start relying on Yahowah. You don't know him, but he wants to know you. And for that to happen, you're going to have to return to him. And for that to occur, you need to listen to me, because I was put in this position expressly for that purpose. So through the prophet Micah, Yahowah said, now, at this time, settlements, towns, and villages, you should band together, apart from societal influences and unaffected by religion and politics. Yeah, he said what I just said, didn't he? You need to disassociate from societal influences, religion, and politics. And you need to start listening throughout Israel, not just in the north, which was hammered by the Hezbollah rockets the last 2 nights, not just in the south that's being attacked again by the Houthis, and not just in Haifa and Tel Aviv that are being pounded by the Iranians. Everywhere in Israel, you need to start listening, and you need to distance yourselves from your politicians and your rabbis. This says that a siege of rebels, of raiders, of an onslaught of plundering marauders will be placed against us. Speaking as a Jew to Jews, he speaks of what I just witnessed as I was translating both Yeshayah 13, and now I'm in the 2nd chapter of Yoel. The story is the same. It is a flood of mujahideen, of Islamic terrorists, of raiders, of robbers, of rebels that flood into Israel. And what the prophets are predicting is 1,000 times worse than what happened on October 7th of 23, when some 4,000 Muslims, half of which might have been Hamas, the others just ordinary Muslims and tenny rompers, decided to come across that border and torment Israel to the point that they knew you'd be so angry that you'd destroy Gaza, trying to hunt down and do the impossible to rid Gaza of Hamas. They knew you would fail, and you did. But more importantly, they knew you would destroy Gaza. And in the destruction of Gaza, they knew that you would do yourself, Israel, far more harm than you would do the Muslims of Gaza. And it's true. They're impoverished, but you're vulnerable and indefensible now because of what you have done. And you were played. This is exactly what they wanted from you. And you're still pounding your chest thinking you did a good thing, but you didn't. The destruction of Gaza was stupid. Counterproductive, Israel. And as a result of what you are doing now in Iran, and with Iran having won the economic war and also the perceptions war, even playing even in the military war, what's the world going to do? You've got 1 billion Marxists that hate you, 2 billion Muslims that despise you. You don't have a country on earth that will stand by you. The prophets say you're about to give up your heart and soul as a terrorist state. And they speak of these marauders, so numerous you can't count them, ultimately coming into Israel 1,000-fold worse than what happened on October 7th of 23. So a siege of rebels, of these raiders, this onslaught of plundering marauders, they are placed against us. With a rod and weapons of war, people associated by race, culture, and geography, Shabbat, will choose to smite, they will afflict, and they will destroy. Both the decision maker and the judge, all things that pertain to exercising good judgment throughout Israel, pounding the jaw. This is Micah. It means who is like, who from me, like can be compared to Ka, Yah, a shortened form, familiar form of Yahweh's name, Micah 5:1. This is the war that's coming, and the war that's coming, your IDF and your politicians cannot stop. When you had 4,000 jihadists over the course of 12 hours in 3 phases, just simply bulldoze the fence down, walk right through, harass Jews, carry Jews back into Gaza, doing so for 12 hours without any interference from the IDF. You need to know that the IDF, the Shin Bet, the Mossad, your government, are absolutely incapacitated when it comes to Muslims and tinny rompers. Oh, they're great with their F-35s. They're really good with the Iron Dome. They're great at spending money. But when it comes to a flood of jihadists, they're petrified, have no idea. They can't fly the Apache helicopters. They can't mobilize the tanks. They can't defend the border. They can't protect kibbutzim. And the Muslims now know it. They know that you send in a batch of rockets. This next one will be hundreds and hundreds of times more rockets. And you send the rockets into the cities, and you send the jihadists into the small communities. There's nothing to stop them. They know it worked before. They know it'll work again. And Israel's more vulnerable now than ever. Your F-35s, your tanks, they're not going to be able to do anything to be able to stop this. One of you can please go out and tell Harold or whoever is on the weed whacker that probably is not the best time for that. So it's a very terrible time because Israel's very proud of their IDF, their citizens army. And, it's done some marvelous things and showed some tremendous acts of heroism. But this is not a foe they can defeat. And the reason they can't defeat this particular foe is because it's not built to cordon off and put off a flood of jihadists. And that's the next war. So with rods and weapons of war, people associated by race, culture, and geography, he's trying to say Muslims a couple of thousand years before the first Muslim existed, certainly 1500, will choose to smite, they will afflict, and they will destroy. Not only the decision makers and the judges, but Israel's ability to exercise good judgment. And there would be two occasions where this would apply, both of which pertain to Dowd. The plundering raiders seeking to restrict and afflict Israelites, robbing them of their dignity, their land, their Messiah, and their place as God's people. Have been many. But in this particular situation, the prophet is speaking of Muslims. Now, because that's what happens in the end, it doesn't change the fact that there have been many assaults on Israel throughout the ages. The Philistines were ruthless, of course. So were the Egyptians. So were the Assyrians. Oh my! And the Babylonians. And then the Greeks were ruthless, and no one has ever been more disgusting and vicious towards Jews than the Romans. And then came the Muslims that plundered the world, killed 200 million people. And then the Roman Catholic Church that treated Jews so brutally throughout the ages, followed by the Ottoman Empire, and then the Crusaders, and then Muslims again, then the Nazis. It's been horrendous. Even the British were abusive to Jews. But there was a place, and there was a Savior, and he was born twice in the same town. Will have had 6 lives by the time it's all over, and 2 of the most important. He was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread, as well as the house of conflict. Ephrath, which is fruitful, branching off and bearing fruit, existing as the younger sibling among the thousands of Yahowah. From you to approach me, this one shall come forth to be the one who writes Proverbs and governs in Israel, whose beginning is from antiquity, from ancient days. Micaiah, who is like Yah, Micah 5:2. It is not well known outside of the covenant family that listens to these programs that Dowd has had many lives, and that Dowd, according to Yahowah, was Adam, which is why Dowd is his Bikuwrym, firstborn, and that Dowd came back again as Shem, and then the young shepherd boy that Yahowah anointed and became king of Israel circa 1000 BCE. Dowd was born in Bethlehem at that time and was a shepherd in Bethlehem when he was found by Shamuel. And in his next life, as he was born again, this time directly as opposed to indirectly by Ruth and Boaz as they returned for this purpose, he was conceived again in Bethlehem. And so it is saying that not only would he come from Bethlehem, but that he would be the one who was present right from the beginning in the garden. You see, Dowd is in fact Adam, and he is the one who is the living embodiment of Mashal, the Proverbs, the word pictures, on behalf of Israel. And he is the ultimate Yehud through whom we can approach God. So as an interesting insight, Dowd indeed was the youngest sibling, while the myths written about the imposter, Jesus, he was the eldest among his brothers. Not that it matters, because everything written about Jesus is a myth. Dowd is real. Further, while Dowd's location was announced and affirmed by God long before this prophecy was written, the myths pertaining to Jesus were backfilled without corroborating evidence long after the fact. Unable to keep their story straight, the gospel writers even allege that he was Jesus of Nazareth, even though the town didn't even exist in the first century in Yahowah. Moreover, only one wrote Proverbs, that would be Dowd, and only one of the two would rule over a unified Yisrael. Therefore, this is yet another prophecy about Dowd, and it is one that has been misattributed to the mythical Jesus. And that is being generous, since the mythological figures such as Odysseus, Hercules, and Dionysus were far more credibly supported than was Jesus. Also, with Dowd, his prior existence is not only noted over 1,000 times, 1,100 actually, in the Torah and prophets, and thus by God, his name was chiseled in stone by his contemporaries. Jerusalem is not only the city of Dowd, but we can also locate his home today. While on the other hand, there is no antiquity for myths. Micah wrote between 735 and 700 BCE, or about 300 years after this event transpired, or about 700 years before it would occur again. And it provided more than sufficient time for Dowd's departure from Bethlehem in 1034 BCE to being considered as long ago, but that's not really from antiquity, because from antiquity tells us that Dowd was Adam. For an unprecedented wrinkle in the framework of time, among the Qumran collections, there was a commentary written on behalf of the sect's righteous teacher, which was based upon Micah. And making his argument against the Pharisees, the Essene wrote, "One shall not come forth, lo yatzah, be brought out, to be the one who writes Proverbs and governs in Yisrael." If his quotation was accurate, then Yahowah was bemoaning the fact that after Dowd, there would be none to lead his people. And in context, there are so few variations between the Essene citations and the Masoretic text throughout the rest of this book. This negation is certainly worth considering. Now, returning to Micaiah's prophetic presentation, this next statement speaks of Yisrael having been released to the influence of others, and then beginning to bud and grow again at long last after an intermission. Therefore, should this be God's family returning, either as covenants or that final remnant, it will be after a painful and traumatic time. Therefore, he shall give them to another, until such time as she begins to bud and grow, conceiving and giving birth. Then the remnant of his brothers will change as they return and are restored as the children of Yisrael. Micah 5:3. Indeed, there is a time of troubles that is between us and this event. It will be 7 years long. It'll start in less than 2 months, 22 May of 2026. And currently, Israel is under the influence of another. God has separated himself from his people, and he will not return to them until they return to him. And at this point, I can't even get them to say his name, which they erased. And so he is going to be distant and estranged from his people until such time as she begins to bud and grow again, such time that she's capable of more than miscarriages. And this will occur when the remnant of his brothers, and the remnant is essential because it is the remnant that is allowed to witness Dowd's return as Messiah with Yahowah on Yom Kippurim, and then enter the 1,000-year opportunity of Sukkah when the earth is transformed into the conditions we've experienced and seen in Eden. And so this remnant will change as they return and are restored as the children of Yisrael. It's from Shub. That's the lesson of Hosea and so many other places. Shub for Shub, or no Shub for you. And Israel needs to Shub. You need to change. You need to return to Yahowah, and then he will relent and return to you. So Yahweh's people will eventually do this. It will be a minority, a vast minority of them, but they will do so. And Yisrael, as a nation, will again bud and grow as they return to the garden, just as they did ever so briefly under Dowd. And as she was then, Israel is experiencing birth pangs, with the world kicking her at every turn, exposing her, and condemning her, making her ever more vulnerable. Further, consistent with this prophecy, Yehudim were given to another during the intervening years between Dowd's life as king and his return as the Passover lamb, but also between that time and his upcoming arrival for reconciliation, mostly been veritable slaves throughout Europe. Especially important, Shub was chosen to reflect the attitude and approach of the remnant of Dowd's brothers, who will be returning, some brought into Jerusalem by Yahweh himself. In keeping with the covenant and Torah, they have changed and are no longer political or religious. At least they are barely so. At least they haven't become religious and political to the extent that they can't be purged of that guilt. And it is by leaving the schemes of men to approach the house of God that this remnant will be restored by the anima parah. And that means that we should recognize that these fortunate few are indeed Israelites. They are neither Christians nor Muslims, but instead those who can attribute their lineage and their lives to Dowd, either through genetics or these lyrics. Additionally, the reference to a surviving remnant of Yisrael brings us ever closer to Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, his return, October 2nd, 6:22 p.m., sunset, in Jerusalem in 2033. Now, this is also addressing what will be the final arrival of Dowd. I think it's his 6th as king and Messiah, Yahweh's shepherd, and his beloved firstborn son. It reads, "He shall be present standing upright. He shall conduct an evaluation and then take a stand, so as to serve as a shepherd in the power and the influence, the strength and fortification, indeed the capability of Yahowah, and in the majesty and glory of the name of Yahowah, his God. Then they shall live and remain, for indeed now at this time they shall be greatly exalted and honored to the ends of the earth. Micaiah, who is like Yah? Micah 5:4. Clearly, there will be a time that Dowd will return. We know that date certain, to October 2033. He will be present. He is going to serve as the ultimate shepherd over his people. He's going to come in great power, in the very capability of Yahowah, which is what God meant when he said that he will be Elyon, the power and strength, the very influence of God. And in the majesty and in the glory of the name of Yahowah, his God, which means if you do not know Yahweh's name, you do not know God. And then they will live, they will remain. The benefit is that after this time, after this homecoming, those who have benefited from the sacrifice of the Anima Paran and now witnessed Dowd's homecoming with Yahowah will enter the millennial celebration of Sukkah, of camping out, for 1,000 years in conditions identical to Eden. And that's where they shall live and remain for that time. For indeed, now at this time, they shall be greatly exalted, honored, set apart from all others and special. And this will be to the ends of the earth. So Dowd is Yahweh's shepherd, no question about that. He was empowered by the very Ruach spirit of God, and he, more than anyone, sang the songs that glorify Yahweh's name. He knew it. He loved it. He shared it. And he relied upon it. Now, the reason that all of this is so important is because Dowd is Yisrael's exemplar. He represents Israel, the good and the bad. And he is also Israel's savior. He's the man whose lyrics, lives, and sacrifices provide the means to reconciliation. He served as the Passover lamb when he was crucified by the Romans in 33 CE. He took our guilt into Sheol the next day on Matsah. And he served as Yahweh's Bikuwrym, firstborn son, and fulfilling Bikuwrym, firstborn children, on the first day of the week. Yisrael, you need to accept this, to experience a more favorable circumstance when Dowd returns. Since Dowd is arriving to fulfill Yom Kippurim after he's already fulfilled Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym 2,000 years earlier, this is being attributed to our Messiah and King. It says, he shall exist as their means to reconciliation and more favorable circumstances. Indeed, when the Assyrian, that's a name that is used, a moniker for Satan, arrives in our land and as a point of emphasis has his way and marches through our fortress and our military bases, and then we will rise up and take a stand over and against him. 7 shepherds and 8 leaders of men. The Assyrian, representing Hasatan, the adversary, is known as Rahab in the prophets. He is presented by Gabriel, Dowd, through Daniel, where his description is a perfect match for Donald Trump and for no one else. In Isaiah, we're told that he will be an egotistical warmonger from a nation that describes America, and that at the time of the fulfillment of Shabuw'ah, he will betray Israel and force Israel to give up its heart and soul, narrowing Israel at the waist with a state of Islamic terrorism carved out of the nation's midpoint. We are told in 4 places that he is Rahab, which is a very concise picture of a confabulator, an egomaniac, a demonic despot. Perfect match for Donald Trump again. And so he is going to come into Israel. He'll arrive in Israel and January, the 29th of January of 2030. And by the Ides of March, he will declare that he is a god. And up to this point, Israel has received Trump as if he were the second coming of Cyrus the Great. And yet he is the one betraying them. And he will continue to betray them. So it says that against him, there'll be 7 shepherds. The 7 followed by or in the company of 8 leaders of men. The 8 are the 8 that are described in the Shabuw'ah and the Towrah harvest, the same 8 each time. And so there are 8 leaders of God's people. And the 7 shepherds could be any number of different people. We know that the characters that God's the most comfortable working with will all contribute in the end. It is the man that was first known as Chanuk and his wife. There was later Noach and his wife, but inserted all along the timeline. You have Dowd, you have Elia, and you have Moshe as the 5 most prominent players. The prophet who wrote the most about all of this and that would have to be considered as a prime player would be Yahowah, Isaiah. He has so much to say about this period, and he wrote the textbook on how to be a proper joder. And so these are examples of those who will be serving Yisrael, along with the 8 leaders of men that we find throughout the harvest. Now, we are introduced to the Assyrian in Yahowah, Isaiah 10, where we discover that it serves to identify Satan. Then in Daniel 9, that Dowd, under the guise of Gabriel, revealed that the adversary would enter Jerusalem on, it's the 29th of January of 2030. And then later he'll be heralded as a god, as if he were divine, by the Ides of March, 15th of March, 2030. Therefore, based upon the content and context of the Micah 5 prophecy, this is yet another acclamation pertaining to Dowd, which is misappropriated and wrongly attributed to Jesus by Peter and Paul and pals. So in so doing, billions have been blinded to the actual doorway to life and have forsaken the means to eternal life. Now, this statement suggests that the Israelites have been pacifists for far too long. Now, before I continue that, there is something that we ought to consider. In this past statement where I was working with the 2 numbers, 7 and 8, it may not be that at all. I translated this for coming home to probably 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, perhaps, and then went through and did a quick update of it maybe 4 years ago. But I haven't translated this in some time, and we have been on a prestigious pace of learning, particularly over the last 6 months to a year. And there is really a distinct possibility that it isn't 7 shepherds, but Sheba also means promise. So over and against him, the promised shepherd and 8 leaders of men would be more consistent with what we have read, because you find the 8 leaders presented in Shabuw'ah, Towrah, and again helping out during Sukkah. So this would be more consistent with Yahweh's plans, and I think that is the better way to render that statement. And so it is a team of individuals or witnesses that Yahweh has selected to prepare and protect Israel at this time. And the statement certainly suggests that Israelites need to stand up and be accounted. They need to oppose those who oppose them, even if they do so with words wisely wielded, which is something they haven't done in a very long time. Now, in this light, we have a couple of options with the concluding clause. And as it says here, that Israel under Dowd will be attacking the 7 shepherds and 8 leaders on behalf of the Assyrian, or there is a possibility that the promised shepherd will lead 8 men against the adversary, actually then in advance of Dowd's return, because this would transpire on Towrah 10 days before our Messiah returns. And I think either of those things are possible. Now, also, I think we're dealing with a promised shepherd and with 8 people. And if you were to take a list of those who have served Yah, there are numerous ways you could cut and slice them. All right, with that said, let's flesh out one of the more interesting conversations chronicled in Shamuel before we turn our attention to a song that is dear to my wife's heart, Hannah's song. So in this next opportunity to teach, I want to turn to 2 Samuel 7 and pursue what we can in one of the most powerful prophecies ever uttered. We broached, of course, this prophecy numerous times before on other programs that I have shared with you. And what follows serves as an important window into our future, revealing how Yahweh has and will continue to work through Dowd and his people. It begins in 2 Samuel 7:9 and is especially illuminating as we move up into 17 and 19 in terms of those verses of the 7th chapter. And it brilliantly clarifies and confirms our approach to God and the statements that are now marked 2 Samuel 7, 21, 22, and 25. And this continues vividly through 2 Samuel 7:29. Now, this conversation is between father and son. It's between God and his Messiah, between Yahweh and Dowd, although delivered by Nathan. As at the moment, God and Dowd, his son, were having a timeout for bad behavior. And it's recorded by Shamuel for our benefit. It is among the most valuable revelations to be found in God's book of essential advice. So as we begin in 2 Samuel 7:8, it reads, "Now therefore, This is what you should say. He's speaking, this is Yahowah speaking to Dowd through Nathan. So now, therefore, this is what you should say to my associate, my co-worker, Dowd, as a result of all of this. Yahowah of the spiritual implement says, I took you from the sheepfolds, from chasing after lambs, to the conspicuous and informative leader among my people over Yisrael. And I have been with you through it all, revealing the benefits of the relationship as you journeyed through life. I have cut off, accordingly, all of your enemies from your presence, and I have engaged on your behalf to make for you an exceptionally important name, the greatest designation, and the most distinguished reputation when compared to even the most glorified designations on the earth. Furthermore, I will appoint and establish a dwelling place for my people, Israel, and I will plant them such that they may abide below throughout in a less chaotic time than this, and no longer be agitated or terrorized. And they will not continue to be afflicted or degraded as they have been, disparaged or denigrated, demonized by unjust and harmful sons, perverted and violent descendants of evil, as will have formerly been the case. Boy, is that ever true. This is exactly what's happened to God's people. From the day which, for the benefit of the relationship, I appointed and instructed judges on behalf of my people, Yisrael, I will provide a respite from all of your enemies. In addition, Yahowah is boldly and publicly announcing to you that indeed he will act, engaging with you to create the family and home of Yahowah. What is the family and home of Yahowah? It's the covenant. What did Yahowah say that he conceived with Dowd, that he literally cut and established with Dowd? It's the covenant. How did he do so? By them collaborating on the fulfillment of Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym, the 3 days that provide the benefits of the covenant. This is how Yahowah acted through and with Dowd to create the family and home of Yahowah. Surely your time will be thoroughly proclaimed and completely fulfilled. Then, after your relaxing rest with your fathers, I will raise you up, and I will take a stand to bring to fruition with your offspring all that you have sown. Something more in the end, without hesitation for you. For the benefit of the relationship, it will be extracted and withdrawn out of a small particle of your physical nature. Yes. The DNA was easy to replicate. The spirit would protect that soul, could put Dowd's soul right back into a body. And so, after a 1,000-year rest, Dowd was born yet again. His 5th of 6 lives to fulfill Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. Born likely on Sukkah and 1 or 2 BCE, so that he would be in his 30s by the time it was ready to fulfill Chag Matsah in year 4000 Yah. God foretold that all of this would happen 1,000 years before it transpired. After speaking through Nathan to his son Dowd, Yahowah transitions to speaking directly to us about Dowd, because until we come to appreciate what God has done through Dowd, there is no hope for any of us. And God says, and so I will establish his reign over his kingdom, He himself shall restore and rebuild the family home for my name, and I will prepare and establish the throne of his kingdom forevermore as a continuing witness. I was, I am, and I always will be for him as a father. And he is and always will be for me as a son. So when that which is associated with him is warped and perverted, twisted, such that it is contrary to what has been stated, I will resolve this dispute against him. I will vindicate him, and I will decide with whom to expose and condemn, even condemn against the various subdivisions, the cults, the clans, and the nations of men, and against the fungus and the plague that has fallen upon the descendants of mankind. It's true. There has been no man in all of history that has been slighted, robbed, impersonated. Literally the first man to endure identity theft. Then Dowd. He had his title, Messiah, his very nature as the Son of God, his purpose as our Savior, his designation as the chosen one, all stolen from him to create the myth of Jesus. And God says, I'm not happy about that, and I'm going to hold the people who did this accountable, because he and I accomplished a great deal, and he is returning as king to rule over his kingdom, which I'm going to restore. And there's going to be a family home for my name, Yahowah, and the throne of his kingdom and his position of honor and power will be forever. And I am his father, and he was and always will be my son. And yet we perverted and warped everything associated with him. Now, with this explanation of the religious crusade to transfer the promises made to the Messiah to create a Christ, which needs to be exposed and condemned, which is why I wrote the 5 volumes of Twistianity. Against this backdrop, God shares. Therefore, my steadfast devotion, enduring love, commitment to the relationship, and unmitigated favor will not be removed from him, be disassociated or diminished regarding him, or replaced, substituting another for him. So why did Christians create Jesus? Why did they steal Dowd's titles? Why did they claim Dowd's achievements when God said this so clearly, and it's been available to them for now 3,000 years? And he says, as was the case when I turned away and completely rejected associating with Shamuel. I know another Shamuel. He was the author of the first 14 books of the Christian New Testament. He was rejected too. He was demon-possessed too. You may know his name, Paul, whom to show the proper way I removed from your presence, just as will be the case with Paul as he is sent to hell. And so your family and your position of authority, your kingdom and reign are assured. That's what Yahowah says to Dowd. As it is trustworthy and dependable, firmly established and credible, even enduring, forever as an eternal witness. In my presence, God says, your throne and your seat of honor, even your full moon, will be established and sustained as a restoring witness to the eternal testimony. Consistent with all these words and according to everything that was said, this entire revelation in this manner. Nathan accurately conveyed this to Dowd, to whom it was all about. 2 Samuel, listen to him. The 7th chapter. This now, the 17th statement. It is becoming ever more evident that the second book attributed to the judge and prophet Shamuel in the 7th chapter, that prophecy is fundamental to our understanding of God's relationship with his beloved son Dowd, especially when combined with the portraits painted in Isaiah, the Mizmor Psalms. It's the most accurate portrayal of the Messiah presented anywhere. And while this is where we left off on previous reviews of this marvelous prophecy, what Yah says next of his son and of our returning king is particularly pertinent to our current discussion. It reads, Then Dowd came, and he sat and remained in the presence of Yahowah. He said, Who am I, Yahowah, my upright one? And what is my home and family? That you have come to include me here and forevermore as a restoring witness. And while the duration and the repetition are relatively significant, he's talking about his many lives. In your eyes, Yahowah, my upright one, you have also given your word, speaking of your co-workers' household and family. Discussing this for a very long time now. Beginning in the very distant past. Yeah, some 3,000 years from this discussion. Additionally, this is Towrah. This is instructive guidance and effective teaching for all humankind, Yahowah, my foundation, my support. Shamuel 2, 7:19. There aren't many men who can claim to have entered Yahweh's presence, much less made a statement like this, such that they can tell us about their experience. But Dowd is one, Moshe and Shamuel were others. So was Yahshua. In Dowd's case, he and his father settled in for a long chat, which began with them speaking about the duration and repetition of Dowd's many lives as he brought forth the restoring witness to his people. It was a remarkable thing for any man, especially this one, who would live 6 lives, some of them the most important in human history, 3 of them for certain. And while this was but a blink of an eye to Yahowah, Dowd's ongoing service to Yisrael would play out over 6,000 years, long before there even was an Israel, and long into our future. I suspect that Dowd knew why Yahowah had chosen him long ago. He was the first man conceived in his image. And it is all an essential aspect of Yisrael's redemption. And if that is the case, then the question is being asked for us to ponder. The more we understand why Yahowah loved Dowd and found this relationship with this soul to be enjoyable and productive and to work with him, I think the more effective and enjoyable our lives will be. We can relax and say we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be steadfast. We have to be observant and thoughtful, responsive, and resilient to be like Dowd. The answer was even provided following the question. This is Towrah teaching. It's guidance for humankind. Dowd's lives reflect Yahweh's intent with the covenant. I'll share one more thought and we'll pick up this program. Hopefully, again, tomorrow we'll have weather that's suitable for being out here in our ocean studio. And this last line also speaks of Dowd by name. It says, what more beyond this can Dowd communicate to you, Yahweh? You are well acquainted with and know your associate. I was unaware of just how true this was until fairly recently. You see, there was really no ability, no chance that Yahweh was going to have gotten to know Dowd as an 8-year-old shepherd boy well enough to know what he would be able to do going forward. To choose him as his firstborn son, to anoint him forevermore at 8 years old, forever giving him his ruach before they had done anything together. God doesn't empower people that he doesn't know. He doesn't choose people blindly. He didn't make this statement, and Dowd didn't acknowledge this about being God's beloved son because they had spent a few years together. No. Yahweh knew Dowd because Dowd is Adam. He is familiar with his name because his name was name, Shem. He saw him work on the ark. He saw him become the forefather of Yisrael in that way. And so by the time we reach this point, he even had the opportunity to see Dowd as El Dowd, God's beloved, supporting Moshe along the way. By the time that they were reacquainted in Bethlehem, as Dowd was just 8 years old, they had a history of 3,000 years. They were well acquainted. And he, Yada, his co-worker and associate, Dowd, an essential part of God's story. And I enjoy being able to share it with you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back out in our ocean studio, hopefully tomorrow. And of course, we will continue with our basics program. I just noticed today that we are just shy of 30 pages now into our presentation of Shabuw'ah on a file that has about 100 and some odd pages. So yeah, we may have to speed up the pace a little bit on Shabuw'ah to get through this material. But, you know, there's more questions on it than almost anything else. And so I wanted to bring it to your attention so that you knew as much as can be known about this important time in our lives. Thank you again for listening. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.